You're not on, Doc.
Not on?
No, sir. You're on now.
We have a few more sections to go through this membership, and then we'll move on to the next article. And I think we will be past most of the articles that have multiple sections. It ought to move fairly quickly then. I'm reminded every time I look at these, and I study them, and I listen to, until I'd get mad and then I'd walk away, I listen to the vote on the preceding and then voting on the impeachment of the president today, off and on. And I'd hear some of the same terms used, like article this, section so-and-so. And then I'd get mad and walk away, and I thought, well, maybe that's why we have so few people listening to this on Wednesday night, because it reminds them of something else. You have articles and you have sections that outline, how you're going to do things, and that's why we're studying this, to know why we believe, how we govern what we believe. And so, I have. It's what happens when you have a loose leaf Bible that's almost as old as you are.
Yeah.
Very close. My pastor, Clyde Box, had this. He bought it in 1976, and he was so proud of it. He showed it to me, and I says, well, when you go to heaven, give that to me. I told him he also had a fish ring that the same guy made his ring that made a ring for me. And we had him at Garrett one time, and Mark was there, and Brother Clyde was there, and he took mine away from me and gave it to Garrett and gave me his. Because I told him, I said, I'm not going to ask your family for it.
Yeah.
If you want me to have it, you're going to have to make sure that they know that you want me to have it. And he, when he ordained me in July of 1995, he then gave me this Bible. He says, you do know that thing is old. I said, yeah. But I've always wanted it. And he gave it to me.
Amen.
Looking for something. That all things be done decently and in order. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 40. Board of Deacons. This is one of the favorites among some churches. How do we keep them demons under control?
Yeah.
We had a circumstance in our church in Bracala once, and I was the chairman. As I said, we had, in my opinion, 14 too many deacons. We had 15 in total. I'm not saying that I could have done it all by myself, but we didn't need 15. But we had 15, and it was what it was. And we had several women got together, and they formed this little committee, and they decided they wanted to send the pastor. I can't even remember where they wanted to send him. Someplace that was fun and a lot of touristy stuff and so forth and so on. And he got wind of it, and he came to me and he said, Don, I don't want that. He says, Betty and I would not enjoy that. If you want to send us someplace, send us back to the Holy Land, or he gave me a couple of other options. So I went to the ladies and I explained to them he said, no, don't tell them I said this.
Yeah.
So that's, and a deacon often finds himself in that position. You got to do this, but you can't tell them where it's coming from. And make a very long story. I mean, it went over for months. And this lady decided that she just didn't like any deacons, much less me. And I was the chief demon of the church. And I went and I told him, I said, all I've done is made an enemy, of her, and I'm really not sure what to do. He says, I do. And he got up, he said, stay here. He went out. she just happened to be coming through the hallway, going past his office, and he called me in and he said, you remember Brother Smith telling you that, he didn't think that I wanted to go here and there and so forth and so forth? And she said, yeah, and I thought that was just awful of him to present it. And he said, he didn't present it. That's what I told him to tell you. I don't know that it helped her in my relationship, but it got me off the hook. But it's important that when you have deacons, that they understand as well as the church understands what their role is.
Amen.
Now, one thing that the deacon's role is they're not the boss of the pastor.
Amen.
If you study scripture, they're servants.
Yeah.
If you want to get real technical, they waited tables,
That's right.
Yep.
took care of the orphans,
Yes.
and the widows. And so, their duties over time have evolved, and I'm not saying that's wrong. I did an awful lot of technical stuff, legal stuff, as a chairman of the deacon, but one of the requirements of the deacons, he needs to be ready and willing and able to step in the pulpit to preach.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why we don't have deacons here, because we haven't had anybody step up and say, hey, I don't know that I'm called to be a pastor, but I do believe God would have me, preach. Then that's the first step, in identifying qualification of deacons. In the absence of that, you still have the legal stuff and everything else. So, and trustee is not though it's a often used position within churches, it's not in the Bible. So what we have done, and most independent Baptist churches have done, is to take the trustee and we put the same requirements on him as we would put on a deacon, except the teaching and preaching. Does that make sense? But he still has to be able to take care, and willing to take care of the business of the church. So when you see deacons/trustees, that's what that's referring to. If we ever had a point where we had deacons, then we'd use them alternately, if you will, for different things. Right now, trustees is all we have. So they're to assist the senior pastor/co-pastor in such a manner as he shall request in promoting the spiritual welfare of the church. That's what it's all about. It's not about power. It's not about getting it your way, having it your way, get it done your way. It's about helping the pastor. They shall, if requested by the senior pastor, consider applications for church membership. Every once in a while, we get somebody that wants to join the church that they come from a background that is not Baptistic, number one. It's not understandable, perhaps, even. I've had people come on and join our church as well. I used to go to the First Baptist Pentecostal Church of God, Presbyterian, and they rattled off about 8 or 9 different denominations. And that alerted me that I'm going to have to sit down and talk with this person and see if they understand. First of all, are they saved?
Yeah.
And if they are saved, were they baptized according to our constitutional bylaws? And so a deacon can help in that, that process if it requires doing any kind of sit down and research with the individuals involved. Then they shall, in cooperation with the senior pastor, disperse the benevolence fund. Some churches single out funds that is just for benevolence. I used to do that, and then I finally stopped it because every time I would put benevolence there, and it seems like there was a little mouse in the auditorium listening, and we would hand out our financial statement. The next thing I know, I'd get 9 calls wanting to know, I need this, I need that, help us with this, and help us with that. And when they had hurricane, it wasn't Katrina, or whatever the hurricane was before that closed down I-45 out there, I made about 45 trips between my home and the freeway, bailing people out that had run out of gas, just sitting there idle, taking them gas. Put some of them up in motels and everything and so forth. Well, obviously that drained our benevolence fund and then some. So I decided, I said, well, I'm not gonna tell Satan anymore how much we're gonna spend.
Yeah.
And I just, we didn't stop our efforts of benevolence, but we stopped advertising that people give this so much, you know, to do it, because then there was the thought, well, we just got to spend it. No, it's there to meet a need when the need is there. It's not there just to spend, to be spending it. We often, as pastors, we make the comment that a lot of pastors don't believe in having savings accounts because they don't want to leave the money to the Antichrist. I don't want to leave the Antichrist any money either, but whether you realize it or not, when that rapture occurs, that twinkling of an eye, when it occurs, you may have planned to do something tomorrow that you're going to leave behind something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
A whole lot of something, whether you like it or not. And it ain't gonna matter. It ain't gonna matter. You know, how much is our property here worth? $700,000-800,000, close to $1 million? We're gonna leave that to the Antichrist, whether we
Yeah.
like it or not. If there was a way that the Lord could say, hey, sell it right now, quick.
Yeah.
But that ain't gonna happen. That ain't gonna happen. So let's move on to paragraph B there. Deacons and trustees will be elected annually to fill vacating positions on the deacon board. And the number of members, the pastor determines how many he needs, you know, to accomplish what he needs. The key here is that he's got a 3-year term. And we specifically say that because there are mostly missionary Baptist churches, but there are Baptist churches. The American Association of Baptists used to do this. I don't think they do it anymore. But as I mentioned this, they vote on the pastor every year.
Yeah.
Every year. Pastor gets voted, and a lot of times that they boot him out every year just because they can.
Mhm.
That's not scriptural.
Right.
That's not scriptural. So deacons, and the interesting part of this is their deacons are for life.
Mhm.
Their pastors can be removed every year, but the deacons stay in there for life. And that too is not scriptural. So we have a term limit of 3 years, and that 3 years, they have to stay off a year. And I mentioned this before, that what I did when I was the chairman of those 15 deacons is I had other smaller committees that I would allow them to work and help us do certain things and stay involved, and then when their year is up, they could be reelected, providing, you know, there wasn't anything coming out of the woodwork there about their behavior or so forth. Annually, the pastor/co-pastor will meet with the deacons to determine if we need, you know, any more. Brother Clyde was always pushing me, more deacons. And I finally told him, I said, I'm gonna say this as gently as I know how. You put any more deacons on there, you're gonna have to get somebody else to run. Because as I said, he had 15 opinions.
Yeah.
And my job was to mold those 15 opinions and down into one. And sometimes it was easy, sometimes it wasn't. I had one deacon that he hated children's ministries. Hated them. He would come in and hated Christian schools even worse, and I was administrator of Christian schools. He'd come in and if a teacher had left the food in the refrigerator, I mean, oh my goodness, it was Katie bar the door. He would catch me at the door coming in, and I'm gonna teach/preach to about 55 or 60 people, and my mindset's on that, and he wants to fuss at me because there was food left in the refrigerator. And so one time I just changed my message and I talked about the ox and the crib.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
You know, scripture tells us that if you want to keep the crib clean, kill the ox.
Yep.
Don't let him in there. But if you let him in there, he's going to poop. He's going to mess it up. He's going to make it dirty. You bring kids into the church, they're going to mess the church up.
Yep.
But kids are going to get saved. Kids are going to bring their parents. You know, so we need to understand that God left us here, and he left his church. Matthew 16:18, he said, upon this rock I will build my church. You know, what do rocks sit on? Dirt.
Yeah.
That's another message, but anyway, a list of qualified candidates will come if needed. Church body be given the opportunity to write in candidates and so forth. And that's just the procedure, how it would be done if if it needed to be done. Paragraph D, immediately following the first annual meeting each year, the Board of Deacons shall assemble and elect within their own number of chairman, vice chairman, and secretary. I tried one year, I said, I think by that time I had been chairman for about 4 years. I said, don't you think it's time you vote somebody else in here? And even the guy who doesn't like kids, he said, oh, no, you're doing a great job. He said, the only thing you don't do that I do is he said, I say, bring a rope and hang him. I said, okay, I'll be chairman for another year. I wasn't going to turn loose something like that on the chairman. Paragraph E, Board of Deacons will constitute the Board of Trustees of the corporation. In our case, we don't have deacons, so the trustees for the corporation are already there, already in place. Trustee is a legal title, however, that comes from the nonprofit corporation world. So it's not something the church has made up. Subparagraph 1, some of the things that they are involved with is to purchase, hold, lease, or otherwise acquire, helping the church, I should say. These kind of powers, you got to make sure, to a degree, to get somebody that has some understanding, at least, of what they're dealing with. They don't have to be an expert. They don't have to be a CPA or a lawyer or anything like that. They need to have some understanding of what it is that they're dealing with, particularly if it's circumstances that require going and sitting and talking with the bank when the pastor can't be there. When I took Garrett, we were looking at the possibility. We had a parsonage, and I didn't need it, and we were looking at the possibility of selling the parsonage, but we needed to do some work on it. And I told our treasurer, I said, we need to go talk to the bank manager and see if we could maybe, get this interest knocked down a little bit. We're paying some real hefty interest. The bank manager said, yes, I will, if you will create automatic payments, out of the checking account. And we could do that. We had an ample balance in our accounts, and I said, yeah, we can. And then my treasurer spoke up and said, no, we can't. I don't believe in that. That too is a different message. We ultimately did it.
Yeah.
Because I sat down and I drew a little map. If we knocked the interest rate, it was basically going to cut the interest rate in half. I think it was like 7%. We could have got it down to 3.5% if we simply automatically paid every month. That's all we had to do. And we had the money. It wasn't in case we had the money, and we would have paid it anyway.
Yeah.
All the thing, she didn't want anybody to sign that check but her. That's what it boiled down to. So we need to be careful and make sure that we follow, our own rules, so to speak. Section 3, the officer of records. The officer of records is the church secretary. You want to take the floor, Miss Linda?
No, thank you.
Okay.
I give up my right.
You can see that there's a lot of detail there, and there's reasons behind it. And one of the things that is most prominent is that back in the days when computers were first coming into their own, we were given laptops as executives, and they had all the software and everything we needed on it. And I was able to take work home with me. And I was over, I had to go out when we wanted to put a shopping center in one of the military bases, and I would do the market research and determine that this particular location was the best place to build it. And it's my job to go and convince usually the 1 or 2 star to go along with us and let us put it there. And usually I had to give a whole lot of facts and figures, so I had it all in my laptop. That laptop didn't belong to me; it belonged to the company. And when I was on vacation, I'd leave the laptop in the office. I could take it home with me, but I'd bring it back in the next day. And about 2 or 3 times a week, one of our IT techs would come and take it away from me and take it up and plug it into. We had the big rooms and all the massive hardware that went with it in those days. And so my point is that their concern was that if I was involved, because I did a lot of traveling by car, I was involved in an automobile accident, they didn't want any information on that computer that wasn't already in our mainframe, that they would lose the information. Because as I'm talking to these commanders, I'm changing figures and I'm adding things to it. Well, what if we did this? What if we did that? Well, the same thing exists with our church secretary. I've had church secretaries in the past who say, well, I can do all of this, but I need to do it at home. I've got small children, and so forth and so on. That's fine, but I still had to bring it in and transfer it over into the church computer. Does that make sense? And a case in point, Bible Baptist Church, when it was first started, the records from the guy, the founding pastor, he did everything at home. He kept everything at home. And when he quit, suddenly left, the church was left with no records.
That's right.
And they basically had to start all over again. They had to reorganize and so forth and so on, all because they didn't have the records to prove that they had done it right the first time. Another pastor over in Waxahachie called me one day and he said, you know, they was co-pastors for a while. Co-pastor left, and when he left, took all the records with him. He said, what do I do? I said, you gotta start again.
Yeah.
Can't get all the records, you gotta start again. So, that's why we say all of that, and we do what we do. The Office of Finance. The owner of finance, this is the treasurer. They have charge of the custody, if you will, of the records. And this, again, is the same circumstance. A lot of treasurers can work from home, but at some point in time, preferably weekly, they bring it in and plug it into the main computers to where we won't be caught with a circumstance to where we're without the information that we need. We say present a written report on subparagraph G of itemized disbursements. That's what we do every 3 months. And the treasurer is also treasurer of our corporation. When we formed the churches together, put ambassador became the legal entity, and Bible Baptist is a legal entity, it ceases to exist, and Landmark Independent Baptist ceases to exist. Brother Randy was our treasurer. We had him sign documents and everything, but we had a vote. They didn't like him, they chose Miss Tammy. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding, Randy. And so, we had to do it again.
Yeah.
I'm assuming she was able to get down there and, sign the papers, but we still have some legal issues that we're trying to work out. And, she's made a great suggestion, I think, of moving us to Syntex. And, I run into it all over Central Texas. It's pretty good size, banking institution. And I like the credit unions. I've been a credit union member for years. There are a whole lot there. You're a member when you're there. You're not a member of a bank.
Right.
But with a credit union, you're a member. So when we become members, you have benefits that you wouldn't have at a bank. So I like that idea. Officer of Sunday School. We often call this a Sunday School superintendent. We're not large enough. This is a big enough deal. Right now, Ms. Charlotte probably wears about 4 of these hats. Children's church and Sunday school and so forth. But our reason for outlining this is, again, making sure that we're all following this on the same page, so to speak. We're all following the same duties. Speaking of that, duties of all officers. They're asked to prepare a written report of their work. We don't normally do that. It would be, the only thing I could think of would be if we were selling and buying property, something of that nature that might get complicated and maybe the members needed to know a lot of detail, that we might go into something like that, but typically we don't. Any officer who neglects his, should be /her duties as outlined by the bylaws for a period of 30 days may be removed from their office. It's never happened, but not with us, but I've been told with other pastors it happens. You know, I'm dealing right now with a lawyer, and he thinks that I'm neglectful. thinks because I'm 77 years old, I'm just sitting at home in my rocking chair waiting for him to call and tell me what to do. And when I go out and go off the grid for 12, 14 days and can't get a signal, ticks him off. He'll get over it. Installation of officers. A public installation service in which all newly elected officers of the church are to be dedicated to their respective offices. It's not only a privilege to serve in the church in one of these capacities, it's a responsibility. And so that's what we're doing here, is we're trying to give it the appropriate respect, if you will, that goes with it. And fortunately, we don't have to deal with majority leaders and minority leaders and stuff like that. I tell you, America's view of politics changed these last couple of days, which is, depending on which side of the fence you're on, good and bad. Article 6, meeting. Meeting for worship. Typically, we're going to meet Sunday. Some churches meet Thursday nights. Some churches meet Tuesday nights for various reasons. Usually they're bivocational pastors and they have to work on Wednesday nights. And that happens. Pastor may change the dates to accommodate special times, and we do this. We'll change the dates around depending upon work when Christmas falls and New Year's and that type of thing. Meetings for church administration. Right now, we're having ours every other or every 3 months. Is that right? Every quarter?
Yes.
Well, there's some key words in there. I don't see it right at the moment. I circled it in my notes up there. As needed.
Yeah.
In other words, we don't have to do those every 3 months. That's what we chose to do right now. And as the church grows and as we get involvement with more things, we may do it more frequently. We may do it out of sync from what people are used to. The point that I'd make here is that, again, that's pastor/co-pastor's call based on the need.
Yeah.
As to what we need to do. However, we do feel it is a part of the ministry. And because it's a part of the ministry, we have outlined, some of these things, stories I tell you, I'm not making them up just to try to emphasize the point. They've actually happened to me. That's what happens when you get white hair. You got a lot of stories that you could tell. I've talked to church members that said, why do we need to waste time praying and doing all of that sort of stuff? This is a church,
Yes, right.
after all. So, we say devotion and prayer, reading the minutes, and so forth down there. You can read what it is. And then adjournment and closing and prayer. It's all to honor God. We want to honor God. That's what we say. Excuse me, we want to do things decently and in order. Special meetings. Yes, there is, the special meetings can be called, and the example that is used there is that the pastor/senior pastor's, co-pastor's position is vacant. And don't want to dredge up from Brother Dennis and Miss Linda, hurtful memories, sad memories. But this church here has been without a pastor. It was caught itself without a pastor when Brother Gary between Waxahachie, the Lord decided that it was his time to come to heaven. Took him to heaven. So the church here was without a pastor. And they had wording similar to this that enabled them to start work right away to fulfill the pulpit. So that's why we make sure that there is a possibility, a procedure for that. Fiscal year, we mention this because you'd be amazed at how many people you stop on the street, particularly today. You talk to somebody under 50 and over 50, you're going to get 2 different answers, sometimes 10 different answers. But under 50, you ask them, what's the difference between a physical year and a fiscal year? Huh? They don't know. They don't know. A fiscal year is a accounting year. It doesn't have to go from January to December. Ours does. That's why we put it in here. We follow the calendar year. My credit union, for example, goes from the 19th of the month to the 19th of the month. I get a bank statement that closes off the 19th of the month. It irritates the fool out of me, because I close everything out at the end of the month. But it closes it out the 19th, so I gotta adjust everything to their such purpose. Ministry of Education, we don't have, I have been one. That is when you have a Christian school. We have all of the procedural statements in here if we choose to have a Christian school at some time in the future. Not making any predictions, not saying we have, we just say it's wise in our political climate to have everything that you can think of that you might possibly meet in the future in here. Church participation. All educational programs or courses of instructions formulated and offered by the church shall be primarily for the benefit of the members of the church. However, we may choose not to do so. When I went to Okinawa for 3 months to stand in the gap with missionaries there, I've shared part of this testimony. When we were there in the 70s, myself and a missionary pastor started Maranatha Baptist Academy. Your co-pastor was there, but you started first grade there, wasn't it? Started first grade there at Maranatha Baptist Academy. Tell you how many years ago it's been. By the way, he's 52 tomorrow. Getting to be old. And we still had that school when we went over there in 2016. And they had gone through both ways. They had opened it up and allowed non-church members to come. Now, they're in a bicultural, bilingual society over there. Actually multi, I should say, because they had a lot of Filipinos living there. They had Chinese living there. They had of course, Japanese living there, and they had Okinawans living there. And the Japanese and Okinawans are different cultures. They speak the same language, sort of. The Okinawan language is a little bit different than Japanese. It's kind of like the Spanish language when you get down in South America and get to Central America. There's different dialects. The same thing. So we put this here, and we make this a point. Because if we reach a point to say we feel like we want to start a Christian school, then we've got this there. And the whole point of bringing up Okinawa is that they had stopped and closed it off to membership because they started with prayer. They had Bible studies, and they were thinking that, well, we're going to see kids saved. And they did see kids saved, but Satan also managed to get in the door too. So that caused them to have to change it. Statement of faith accord. Anything that we would do would have to be based on the Bible. We would not, we have curriculum that's available to us that parallels to a degree what is taught in public schools. In my opinion, is very superior. But we would still, everything would be based on the Bible. Unity. Of course, if we did a Christian school, it would be a ministry of the church.
Yes.
It wouldn't be a standalone ministry. There's a Christian school that just started here in the last couple of years in Ennis, and I did some research on it. I can't remember what church it's out of, but it's a standalone institution, which means they're not, they are taxable if they stand alone. Teaching. Same thing, just keep emphasizing it's going to be based on the inerrant Word of God. Christian walk. All administrators, instructors, teachers shall continue or adopt a lifestyle consistent with the precepts which they teach. That's what's happened to a lot of our Christian colleges.
Mm-hmm.
They've allowed professors to come in and preach what they think, what they believe. And what it boils down to is that everybody in here tonight believes that this Bible is the Word of God. You know, and if we're honest with ourselves, there's parts of that Bible that hits us right upside the head.
Yep.
But it's still the Word of God. We still have to follow it. I don't have the authority to look at that when I'm going to preach up here and say, well, I don't agree with that. I want to put my spin on it. If you start comparing, you've heard me use this illustration many times, all the different versions of the Bible. They're different. And some add to, some take away, and some of them are at least fairly upfront, says this is translated thought for thought, not word for word. Difference when you get away from the words and you start translating based on a thought. Okay, who thought it?
Yeah.
Who thought it up? You know, and then you get what you get. So, unauthorized expenditures. Any expenditure in excess of $500 not authorized in a regular annual budget must be authorized by the senior/co-pastor or the board of deacons. Again, we had a water leak underneath our building at Garrett, and I didn't discover it until Friday. And it was right in front of the ladies' restroom. I cleaned it all up, vacuumed it out with my shop vac. Come back 30 minutes later, and the water was back there. My treasurer was out of town. They had a $300 limit in what the pastor could spend. So I called Garcia Plumbing, because they were the only ones that I could find that had this radar that they could go in and tell me exactly where the leak was. And he went through all of our property and showed me where the leak was. And he said, this is going to be expensive. And he said, I know you're a church. He said, we'll give you every break we can. But he said, you're looking at about $900 to get this done. And I'm thinking, my treasurer just absolutely going to have that proverbial cow. I said, well, let me ask you, can you give it to me in 3 bills?
Yeah.
$299 a piece. He said, yeah, I can do that. I said, okay. I said, can you do it over a 3-week period of time? He said, sure, yeah, I'll work with you. He said, you must have a treasurer that holds you to bylaws. I didn't say that. He knew what I was talking about.
Yeah.
So I was having to get him to maneuver things to where I'd fit what was written here. So, anyway, any member of the church or its mission churches, ordination, well, let me back up. Ordination. We don't refer to this as a, well, we do. It is an ordination of the church. It's an we have Lord's Supper and we have baptism, which are ordinances of the church. This is another one. We don't often talk about it. Is JD still licensed?
Yes.
JD, some years ago, was licensed in this church. Licensing is a step that you can take if somebody is called a priest but not called a pastor. And JD was licensed here some years ago. But again, he's out of this church.
When we licensed him, it was stipulated that he was licensed to marry and marry under the authority of the pastor of the church.
Yeah.
So if I left, then he would have to operate under the authority of Mark.
Yeah.
If Mark and I left, then he would operate under the authority of the city pastor at the time.
Yeah.
And he can't do anything unless he
You
goes
agree?
to us to do it.
Yeah, unless you approve it.
Now,
So, yeah.
that's the difference between ordination and.
Now, having said that, if a man comes to us and says, I feel called to preach, I feel called to ultimately pastor,
Yeah.
this is what this is designed for. There's a process, that we'll go through to work with them, to lead them and guide them and direct them of how to do it. You ultimately reach an ordination committee, which is made up of ordained pastors, and they grill a person to make sure that they're adequately prepared in the scripture. I can still remember mine. It was one of those wet your britches type moments. Wondering if he was going to have all the answers, or not. But the only question there they gave me was, after talking back and forth there, and they said, have you ever been married before? I said, no. I got not married and was 10 years old. We've been married ever since.
Yeah.
Then they asked, Brother Clyde asked me, he says, when you start preaching on your own, he says, what's going to be the subject of your messages? I said, well, I can think of 3 pretty quick. Number 1, I'm going to tell people how to be saved. Number 2, I'm going to tell them how they can tell somebody to be saved. And number 3, I'm going to tell them how to live after they're saved. He closed his Bible and he said, that's enough for me. Anybody else got anything? Got up and walked out. I didn't sleep for a week knowing that was coming, and that was the only question he asked me. Anyway, ordination procedure, we give the procedure on how we would go through that. Now here we get a little bit complex, and I'm gonna try in 10 minutes to go through it. Indemnification. Indemnify, I put intentionally in the words in parentheses there, protect. That's what indemnification means. It's a legal term. It's what we do to protect our church, protect our people. Now, what that whole paragraph talks about, nola contendere, I'll get to in just a moment. But we're saying that if somebody sues the church and they think Jeff and Kelly have something to do with whatever they've been wronged with, and they sue Ambassador Baptist Church and they sue Jeff and Kelly at the same time, or whatever. Well, we have insurance
Yeah.
to protect us and Jeff and Kelly, being members here. So that's what all of this deals with. That if innocence until proven guilty,
Right.
our insurance will cover it unless wrongdoing is uncovered. Then instead of covering it all, they'll cover part. They'll protect the church, unless it can be proven that the church was directing Jeff and Kelly to do it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry I picked you out, but
That's all right.
I figured you're tough, you can take it. So, nola contendere, let me make sure I get to my notes here. It's another legal term. Got further down the road than I thought. It means conviction, but does not admit guilty. Guilt. And what that means is you hear a lot about the plea bargaining. You know, close. Helped a church member one time that got arrested for it. When I was in Okinawa, my secretary, church secretary, brought me a letter that authorized me entrance to the military prison. And I said, "What do I need this for?" She says, "Well, we have a church member there." Long story short, he was a lieutenant colonel, and he got caught up in a porn sting. And when he was in there, I visited a number of times over there in 3 months, and he told me, he says, "You know, I'm guilty of falling into Satan's temptation." But he said, "I did nothing." He says, "They totally took away my retirement." He said, "I've been in the military 30 plus years." He said, I've lost everything." He said, "Maybe that's what God wants. I don't know." But he says, "I need your advice." And I said, "Well, my advice is that one step at a time, get out of here. Get back to the States, get yourself settled, get your family settled, and hire a lawyer. Not a judge advocate, but a lawyer. And tell the lawyer the whole story, how you got into it, what you admit to, and what you're going to do is you're going to plead nola contendere. You'll go to them and you'll say, "I'm guilty of the sting, but let's be reasonable here in what the consequence of that sting is. I've already spent X number of days in the military brig. I've already been forced out of the Army, taking away all of my benefits, taking away all of my retirement, putting my family in a period of hardship that is an extreme." And last I heard, he did that, and it worked. So it's using the system, if you will, to obtain the result that still covers the guilt, but covers it properly and not over extreme or anything like that. But what we're saying is our insurance looks at that. Our insurance will measure that. And it particularly would probably apply that if somebody in the staff is doing something that the pastor doesn't know about, and it's proven that they're guilty, but yet the law is gonna try to come in and do every bit of damage it can to the pastor and the church at the same time. Well, Nola Contendere is there so you can go back to the attorneys and say, listen, we can prove, if you wanna go through a separate court, we can prove this pastor did not know anything about this. Now, did the staff member do it? Yes, it's been proven, he did it, he admitted it. But we need to separate the two, and that's what Nola Contendere means, you know, to where we can get that done. I know you're bored to tears with the legal lesson, but that's why we have that in there. Expenses subject to indemnification. If you have to hire a lawyer, our insurance will cover that. Again, providing innocence is continues to be the case. The timing of an indemnification, it's up to the court. You know, however long, there's statute of limitations for certain things, and certain things there's not. And with every administration, it bounces back and forth with whatever's there. So really, we're saying the timing of it, our insurance goes with the law, whatever the law says. The extent indemnification provided with this article shall be deemed to be discretionary unless otherwise required as a matter of law or under any agreement or provided by insurance purchased by the church, both as to action and each person seeking indemnification under this article in his official capacity and as to action in another capacity while holding that office. In other words, unless you've got a conflict of interest there, our insurance is going to take care of us. That's what we say there in section 6. Tax exempt provisions. Private inurement. Inerment's another word that everybody knows what that means. I mean, after all, we use it. It means personal gain. Just here recently, there's an independent Baptist pastor got caught skimming money. He was skimming money from, if I remember what I read correctly, from an elderly person in the church. And it got up to $100,000+. So now they're looking into it. Well, if he's gonna steal for this old guy, maybe he was stealing from the church too.
Yeah.
And so it's got a big mess. And of course, the media being the media that we have today. See, we told you them independent Baptists are crooks. You know, so inurement, we basically can't do anything for personal gain. We just can't. There's too many loopholes. I mean, Christian Law Association and Church Law and Government, they'll tell you, you know, if in doubt, don't. You know, just don't. Political environment. Brother, I don't know if our president is saved or not. I hope he is. He says he is. But he is gradually opening up to churches to be able to, you know, pray in school and so forth and so on. I say churches, but to Christianity, to pray. But still, the law says that we as a church, we have a tax exemption to operate a church. We do not have a tax exemption to get behind a chosen political candidate and help them and promote them and so forth. So that's what that means. Dissolution. The unlikely event of a need for the dissolution of the church. And I used, I think, as an example of this earlier, eminent domain. We have eminent domain laws here in the state of Texas. And if our church had been located over before in the area before they built the AT&T Stadium over there for the Dallas Cowboys, we would have been faced with this. Legally, they could, now there's legal hurdles that they can go across. They could have kept the same name and moved to a different location and so forth and so forth. But a lot of them, they just chose to dissolve and start all over again somewhere else. But that's what this is here for, is in the unlikely event, I don't know, that we'd ever face something like that here, but you don't ever know. But the United States Internal Revenue Law, let me back up here. If we dissolved completely and went away, where does the money go? We sell the property, pay all the bills, we go find, and it's the same committee, trustees, pastor, co-pastor, gets together and they locate a like-minded church somewhere that the church all agrees with. And I think, if I remember, we had to have 90% vote for it, so it's fairly high. Some churches have 50% go to missionaries the church is supporting, and 50% go to the church. That's what we did at Landmark. We had 50% going to Bercalo until Bercalo ceased and went in a different direction. So then we changed it back to where we just give it to the missionaries. But we would do this to the letter. Let me see if I can stop there. I think I can, y'all give me another 5 minutes, I can finish it. Okay?
Absolutely.
Racial non-discrimination. That doesn't need to be stated, does it? We don't discriminate against anybody. We don't discriminate against who they are, what color they are, where they're born, or anything like that. What we may discriminate against is what they do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the only case. And you better watch our laws, because they're trying to make them to where that what they do is okay.
Yeah.
And it is as screwy as it sounds, they've already opened the doors to that with the LGBT laws that have been changed. I mean, the doors are open for that. Limitation of activities. Notwithstanding other provision of these laws, these bylaws, the church shall not, except to any insubstantial degree, engage in any activities or exercise any powers that are not in furtherance of the purpose of the church. In other words, I used the example early on about the church that I know of in Louisiana that had the barbecue, and it grew, and they built a separate building, and they started running a restaurant, and they were claiming it as a ministry of the church because they would use the money to pay this. But it was interesting that the pastor made $90,000 a year, and each of the deacons even had a stipend that they were given, and so forth and so on. Well, IRS wasn't buying that in a minute.
Yeah.
So that's what we're saying here. Designated contributions. From time to time, the church, in exercise of its religious and educational charitable purposes, we may establish fund goals for certain things.